Today's Judah al Tishrei, the day after Yom Kippur, and today's daf is daf Kuf Yud. Although we learned part of it yesterday, we'll review it so that we can learn the full daf Kuf Yud today. Okay, so we'll start from the bottom of daf Kuf Testament base, about 7 lines from the bottom, and we were talking about sometimes the pasuk is miyaches somebody after somebody who in real life is not really his grandfather, yet the Torah is miyaches somebody after that person because it's not saying that you're literally his child, but you're his child as far as following his meisim. And if you follow the meisim of a good person, to be the equal of a good person, but if you follow the meisim who's not so good, then you could be attributed to him, like Yona's son was attributed to being an enikol of Menashe, who was Mishpacha Shehuda, who was not such a good king. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right here. Amar Rabbi Lozer, La'olam Yidbak Odom B'toivim. A person should always connect himself to good people. Sherei Moshe Shenosa Bas Yisroi. Moshe, who married the daughter of Yisroi, which is not so good. Yotza Mimenu Yohaina son. Yohaina's son came out of him, who was the person who ended up being a kohen in the sanctuary of Avodah Zarah of Micha. But Aaron, on the other hand, Shenosa Bas Aminodov, he married the sister of Nachshon, the daughter of Aminodov. Yotza Mimenu Pinchas, he was Zoicha Tav Pinchas come out of him. Frank Gemara, just like Yohaina's son was an enikol of Yisroi, Pinchas was also an enikol of Yisroi. Yes, Pinchas's father Elazar was a son to Aaron HaKohen, but Pinchas had a mother too. And who did Pinchas's mother come from? Pinchas lav me Yosy, v'ksiv Elazar ben Aaron lokach loy. Who did he marry? Mibnois Putia loy leisha. It sounds like he was a brother-in-law to Moshe Rabbeinu, so he also married into the mishpach of Yisrael. Zok to Gomer, my love, the awesome Yisrael shepite magolim lavodah zarah. Zok Gemara, no, you can't say Putiel, but that means Yisrael. Putiel has another meaning to it. Lloyd also Yosef shepitpit b'Yitzroi. Yosef was misgaber over his Yitzhar in an unimaginable way. So maybe it's l'shvach. Zok to Gemara, you can't say that because the Gemara tells us that when Pinchas killed Zimri and Cosby, the Shavatim were mevazim. Well, Shavatim mevazim oisoi the Oimrim reisim ben putizeh. Did you see this ben puti? Ben shepite avi imoy agolom lavodah zarah. A person who his father's mother fattened up agolom lavodah zarah. He's going to come and tell us what's right and what's wrong. Not only that, he's going to have the gall and the audacity. Yara Gnosi Shevet Yisrael. So you see clearly that Pinchas was an enikol of Yisrael. Right off the bat, I guess I don't have the answer, but there's also a rule of B'mokem Shubal Tshuva Aimdim. I feel Tzadim Gemorah Aimdim. Yisrael ended up being a very chashuv yid. We're dredging up his past. So that Klal Yisrael did it when they were angry at him. Yes, he'll always look for someone's bad, but that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should say that he'll have bad things coming out of him. So vice to chois, there's a lot of moving parts over here. There's huge milas, but there is also some type of contribution to his DNA that maybe could lead to problem. Afterwards. Oh, that's a very good point. It's a very interesting point. I didn't even think of that. The Maharsha says this is not guaranteed. Avad, you have many people that are enikloch that are good. As a matter of fact, even Yonis said the tshuva flema b'soif yoma. It just means there is something there in your DNA that you need to be careful of that could influence you, but it's not guaranteed in any way. Okay. So Zok to Gemara, Ella, what you have to say is Elazar's wife could not have been the daughter of Yisro. Rather, she was maybe a granddaughter of Yisro. And she had two parents. Maybe one of her parents was the child of Yisro, but the other of her parents stammed from Yosy. So therefore, then Ima the Ime would be Mi Yisro, and the Avua the Ime Mi Yisro, Ima the Ime Mi Yosef. Dekanami, I'll prove to you that she stammed, Elazar's wife stammed stai from Yosef and sai from Yisro. Putiel. Putiel means tarti. There's two references to the word puti. One could be Yosef, the other one could be Yisro, who was Mafatim Agolim Lavadizara, Tarti Shema Mino. Now, I just want to point out the bottom of Homa Beis, they says Avi Imoy, the father of his mother was Mafatim and was Lavadizara. But the way we're learning the Maskana here is it wasn't the father of his mother. It might have been the grandfather or great grandfather of his mother. So the Rashbam and Tosfos struggle with the problem. Because let's see how far removed Yonasan was from Yisro. Yisro will be called generation number 1. Tzipora, Moshe's wife, would be generation number 2. Gershon would be generation number 3. And Yonasan would be generation number 4. Okay. Now let's look at Pinchas. Yisro would be generation number 1. His child would be generation number 2, unnamed. His grandchild would be the generation number 3, and then comes Pinchas, who's generation number 4. Isn't that exactly the same? So that's Tosfos' kasha. So Rashbam says, yeah, we're saying that there was probably another generation mixed in. Not that it's muchach, but it must be that there was one more generation mixed in, which then pushes Pinchas one generation away. I'm sorry? Right, exactly. Now, the Maharsha talks about this. The Maharsha says, why didn't the Gemara answer? Yes, from one side, he had a bad influence. He had Yisro. But from the other side, he had Aaron Kohen. Maybe that should be the difference. They might be the same distance away, but Pinchas had very good DNA to maybe neutralize his bad DNA, while Yonasan didn't. But the problem is Moshe's pretty good DNA too, right? So that's what the Maharsha struggles with. But that's why the Rashbam had to say there must be the extra dog. Tosfos has another side. Tosfos has a different approach. So let's look at the top Tosfos. Tosfos says in Taimar, Imkein Heich Pinchas ben Tovim Tzvei Yonasan. They're both in the same level. Sure, Ime the Pinchas mi Yisro Yosa. Ki Heiche the Ime Davu the Yonasan mi Yisro Yosa. Zogt the Gemara v'Yishloimer mishum she Yonasan haya mitzad ha'av. Yonasan's yichus to Yisro was through his father. Why? Because Yonasan has been Gershom. So Aviv, meaning Gershom, was ben Bas Yisro. He was the son of the daughter of Yisro. So if you look at Yonasan himself, the influence that came through Yisro was from his father. Upinchas mitzareim. Pinchas' mother was the one who brought in the yichus of Yisro. So it sounds like you're more influenced by DNA that comes through your father than by DNA that comes through your mother.
Yeah, the mother's side, it's not so hard.
The Gemara yesterday discounted Mishpacha Seim Leikari Mishpacha, and I added even if they're rich. So this is very interesting because I spoke out yesterday. There's a beautiful sikh from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe asks a lot of questions about the story when everyone ganged up on Zimri. First of all, he asks, it says that Shahayu Shvatim Mevatzim. You would think the Shvatim would cheer him on. There was one Shevet Shimon that was doing something terrible, and he stopped it. Right? The rest of Klal Yisrael should be indignant. Wow, look, how does this Nasi behaving? Yet it doesn't say that Shevet Shimon ganged up. All of Klal Yisrael ganged up on him. That's one of his questions that he asked. Another question that he asks is, they're trying to be Mavasa Pinchas. And what are they trying to say? Your grandfather was a Bala Zara. You're going to tell us what to do? So it should have said, what's up? It says he was Mafatim Agolim Avodah Zarah. He did much worse than that. It's known that Yisro tried out every Avodah Zarah before he concluded that our religion is the real religion. So, why did they Dafka pick Shapitim a golem of Zor that he's Mafatim, he prepared a golem of Zor? Why don't you reference something that's so much more demeaning? That he was a huge Ovid of Zor. The other question he asks is, why does it say Avi Imo Yagolim? His grandfather. What's the difference? How it's his grandfather? As far as embarrassing, your grandfather was a lowlife. You have to tell you the Yichas. The response was, Rashi says the reason why it says Pinchas, Ben Elazar, Ben Aaron HaKohen, the Torah is so detailed in B'miyachas Pinchas is because they were focusing on the Yichas that he had from Yisrael. So Zokla Bava was something beautiful. It wasn't the Bnei Shimon that was attacking Pinchas. It was actually rest of Klal Yisrael. And they said, who do you think you are? You're a little guy. You're going to jump in front of Moshe Rabbeinu? It's a chutzpah. You're a major mechutzah that you think you could take matters into your own hand. When there's Gedolei Olam, there's God Ladar, there's Moshe Rabbeinu, and you're jumping? Even though the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu instructed Pinchas to do it. Because Pinchas told Moshe Rabbeinu, Kanam Poigamboy, and Moshe says, Kayana Digrasa, you're the one who read the letter, you brought the message, you do it. But who said all of Klal Yisrael heard that? So here they see this little guy pushing his way to the front, jumping, what a chutzpah. So they started thinking to themselves, we're not so convinced that you're such a holy guy, and you're doing it mamash l'shem shemayim. We strongly suspect that there's some other factor in here. And your grandfather, you know what your grandfather did? One of the most brutal, violent, sadistic things that someone could do is torture an ego by stuffing it. Why? Just to kill it. That's a horrible, bloodthirsty, sadistic thing to do. And we believe that you have that genetics inside you. And we believe it's your bloodlust for violence that made you jump at the opportunity. So we don't think you're in Gatzal Hashem Shemayim. We think you're just a violent, sadistic, bloodlust person who was looking for an excuse to kill. And it was totally not Hashem Shemayim. That was your time. And the reason why they said Avi, that's why they picked Pita in Bedafka. The reason why they said Avi Imoy is because we know that if the Ish is Mazriya Tchila, the child ends up being a female. And if the mother's Mazriya Tchila, the child ends up being a male. So from there, the Bava Rebbe extracts that it must be that the DNA of a person comes primarily through his mother. So if you're a male and if you're a female, your DNA primarily comes from your father. So Avi Ime Bedavka, Yisrael was the sadist. Who did it go to? Not to his sons. It went to his daughter because he influences her. And then she would not pass it on to her daughter. She would pass it on to her son. So it's Bedavka Avi Ime because they're trying to illustrate that this sadistic nature was infused into Pinchas, and that's why he was doing this. So therefore, the Torah says, no, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. This is a Deyazach. Deyas, who do you get? You get that from your father. And your father is the primary influence of Deyas, as Tosha says, right? That's why the Torah says Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, and where does his Deyas come from? His Deyas comes from Aaron HaKohen, who's an Oyev Shalom, V'Roidev Shalom, and he did this truly out of running after Shalom between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. So it's a very nice shtickle, but it doesn't stick with the Gemara, because the Gemara says it wasn't just one generation, it was many generations. So it's much more geschmack to learn the Sikha before I learned this Gemara. Now that I learned the Gemara, there's a lot of questions that could be asked. Okay, Zokt Eile Gemara weiter. Omer Rava, Hanoisa Isha, one who marries a woman, Tzorich Sheyivdoik Bacha, has to be boidek the brothers of the woman that he's marrying, because we're going to learn in a second. Shenemar v'yikach aharon es Elisheva bas Aminodov achois nachshon. Zokt Gemara imashma shenemar bas Aminodov. It says bas Aminodov. So who was the most famous, well-known child of Aminodov? None other than Nachshon. So the moment you say bas Aminodov, everybody knows this is Nachshon's sister. So any idea shachois nachshoni? Matam elomer achois nachshon mikan shanoisi isha tzorich sheyivdoik bacha. You have to check the brothers of the woman who you want to marry. Why? Tana roiv bonim doimin la'achayin. Most of the children are going to look like the wives of the mother. Now, I have a set of nephews, errands that are off the charts, and I always tell them, "You better behave yourself because you're going to ruin my reputation." And I said, you owe everything you have to me because I am your mother's brother. So according to this Gemara, the reason why you're who you are is because of me. So don't you dare ruin my reputation. What's that? What do you mean? Okay, no. Maybe they're the same. So being that you're making a chasna soon, I want to share with you Gishmaka Sheva Brachas Torah that Shlomi Ox told me. But you know where else it uses the Lashon of Achos? Mashal quotes it. At the end of Parshas Toldos, it says as follows. All the way at the end of Toldos, the Pasuk tells us who Esav decided to marry because his father was not very enamored with his wives that he chose. So it says, Vayelech Esav El Yishmael, Vayikach es Mochalas Bas Yishmael ben Avram, Achos Nevoyos Al Noshav Lo Lish. So, Greg Shlomi, you could have the same story over here. He checked the brothers of this woman he wanted to marry. Now, he might not have been looking for the same things in the Shidduch that Elazar was looking for, but whatever it was, he also checked the brothers to make sure that they would be similar. So how come the Gemara doesn't quote this? The Adrabah, the Chazal quoted in Rashi, which is a Gemara, has a whole binyan from here. And it says since it talks about Achos Nevoyos, it must be that Yishmael had died after the Kedushin, and then the Suin was done by the brother in the Nevoyos. So this is what the Gemara uses to establish the date of Yishmael's death. And that's how we figured out how old Yaakov was, which led to us to understand how many years he was by Shem Ve'ever. Because if you use that as part of the whole calculation, there'll be a 14-year gap missing in Yaakov's life. So it was through this key piece of information as to when Yishmael died that we're able to do the math. And we can discuss it after sure. It's a very interesting calculation. But through that, if you do the math, you know that Yaakov was in Shem Ve'ever for 14 years. Correct? Shlomi Ox, why did you just say Boit Kimacha? Who said you have that? Who said you have to learn that it means that Shmuel died? Maybe Shmuel didn't die. He was just checking the brother's name. That's what Shlomi asked. So Shlomi answered very posh. Because over there, it's brought down, why did people want to be Mishadach with Avram's Einiklich? Because it was very choshev, right? You find many people were even became a Pelegish just to be able to get into Avram's family. So over here, it's possible that yes, it was Boidik Bachos, but that's only it's not because they were looking for the actual characteristics of the brother. They just wanted to be in that family. That's why he wanted to do it. So you don't have a raya. But over here, when Gershom married, Gershom was already. I'm sorry. When it was Elazar who married Achos Nachshon. Who was? I'm getting mixed up already. No, Aaron took Elisheva, but when Aaron married Elisheva Basaminodov, she was already Aaron was already Aaron Kohen, so he didn't need to marry into a chashav family to upgrade his stature in society. So Shlomi said he was speaking about it. He was speaking about a shidduch where he personally knew the family very well. So he said here there's both factors. Even if I didn't hear anything about the boy, but I love the family, and on top of that I have the boy as well. So there's two factors. That's what he used as a Sheva Brachas Torah. So it's a very huge stickle. Lamais is not oiskahal. Because the Mashal explains the reason why you don't make the same drush over there is because it says Vayelech Esav El Yishmael. When he went, why does it Vayelech? It's from the Vayelech that we're being medayik. By the pasuk Havarin is used Vayikach Aaron Sheva Basaminodov. But when it says Vayelech means he went to Yishmael, that's where the diik is from. He went to Yishmael and he had to deal with Nevoyos. So that's the right that Yishmael must have died. I'm not learning the Gemara over there, but the Mashal, the Farish mentions this kasha, but for a good word, you could work around that. Okay, Gavaldik. The other problem with his word is the Rashbam right over here of the north. Look at what the Rashbam says. Rashbam says, Malamet shebodak ba'achel lefi shehoisa achos nachshoin shehaya nosi lemata Yehuda mitoich hashivusoi lekach lokcha. He also wanted the stature of marrying in to the family of a Nasi. So unless you learn Rashi, it's not the Nasi that he was impressed with. It's that he was a chosh of a man that made him be worthy of being a Nasi. But again, for a good word, you massage things a little bit. But I thought it was a very creative idea that Shlomo came up with. Beautiful. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. But Yosuru, what happened is you have this fellow who was an anical of Moshe Rabbeinu, and of all places, he ended up in a really bad place. He ended up being a priest in Beis Micha. So let's have a look at the pasuk. Hema in Beis Micha is a pasuk in Shoftim. Behema hikiru es koil hanar. The Shevet Don was walking by, people from Shevet Don, and they recognized the priest's voice, and they knew that it was one of theirs. So therefore, Behema hikiru es koil hanar Levi said, "Wow, that's Yonason. What's he doing in a base of Avodah Zarah?" By Yasur, they turned to question him. They were shocked to find him there. Who brought you here? And what are you doing here? This is like a very repetitious question. I'm bombarding him with three questions. What was their intent in those three questions? They told him, question number one. Moshe Rabbeinu was in the highest madriga of Kedusha Nevuah. He was mafresh himself from the Welt, and to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you are being mafresh yourself from the Kadosh Baruch Hu to be close to Avodah Zarah. How dare you? Lav me Moshe causes. Don't you come from Moshe Dechsivei Mazeh Biyotcha? Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, your Zayda, what's this in your hand? Referring to the stick which he took out Klal Yisrael from Mitzrayim. Lav mi Moshe ka'asis dichsiv bei va'ata. I'm sorry, that's the third one. So the second question is, when he asked, "Uma ata oisa b'zeh," they were referring, what are you doing with this zeh that you have in your genes from your Zayda, which is leading Klal Yisrael and being a loyal servant to the Rebbeinu Shalom? And the third question was, Lav mi Moshe ka'asis dichsiv bei va'ata poi amoidi modi. And you're going to be Tasa Koyin, Lavoi Dezorah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu that you're going to stay with me, and you're going to take that yichus, and you're going to serve Avodah Dezorah. How you talking? They called him out. Omar Lahen, he says, don't look at me so bad. There is a reasoning, just reasoning for what I'm doing. Kach mukublani mi beis avi ava. I got this from my Zayda Moshe Rabbeinu. You know what Moshe Rabbeinu taught us? This is Moshe Rabbeinu who taught Klal Yisrael Torah. You should even take a job working for Avodah Zarah, but don't have to come on to other people. You got to get a job. Learning is very important, but you have to have a job. Don't put yourself into a situation where you don't pronounce it. But the problem is Moshe Rabbeinu said that, but he didn't mean the way Yonason understood it. But whosoever Yonason misunderstood it, Avodah Zarah mamish. And Moshe Rabbeinu meant you could even work for a church. That's never what Moshe Rabbeinu meant. What he meant was El Avodah Zarah is Avodah Shazara Loi. Avodah Zarah means strange Avodah. That doesn't automatically mean it's Avodah Zarah of Akum Mazalos. He meant work that normally you wouldn't do. In other words, blue collar work. How you talking? You could be an accountant, you could be a lawyer, but you're going to lower yourself and you're going to do such dirty work. That's what he meant. In other words, never did Moshe Rabbeinu sanction working for Avodah Zarah no matter what. It just means work that's below your dignity. Zok Tehelig Rashbam Shizara, which is the second from the bottom skinny lines, who choshev, you're a choshev a guy, malacha nimvize umuchara, to disgusting malacha el shem ba'isra, but avada there's no isra involved. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu meant. No matter how much you have to lower your pride, and even if you're a Talmud Chacham, and maybe even lower your level of Kabbalah Torah, people seeing you do something, but if it's to earn a living, it's perfectly noble. Kidu Amalei, Rav, Rav Kahana, like Rav once told Rav Kahana, Netoish develta b'shukra, even work on a smelly carcass and strip its hide, if that's what you're hired to do for money, ushkalakra, and get paid so you can support your family honorably, but never say, Gava Rabbanu, I'm a choshev guy, I'm a koyin, I'm a chochem, I'm a this, I'm a that. Don't say that. Vizila b'mils. Never, ever, ever do that. Rather, when it comes to supporting your family, there's absolutely nothing that's dishonorable about it. And I still remember going back, must have been like 35 years ago. No, it was 30 years ago probably. I remember I was in yeshiva, I was in koil, I was learning, and I would schmooze and learning with the rebbeim and their yeshivas. I was a regular guy in yeshiva. And the first day on the job, when I was training to be an air conditioning technician, the first day of the job, I was on the roof of the yeshiva fixing the yeshiva's air conditioner. I was there with my boss. And I remember Rabbi Felder walked up. Rabbi Felder, he's related to our Rabbi Felder, but he's a Rav in Lakewood, and we used to always shmooze and learn with him. And he walks up. No, it wasn't Rabbi Felder. Rabbi Felder, we went to his house. Rabbi Malkiel walked up, and he's walking towards yeshiva, and he sees me working on the roof. And he's like thinking, like, weren't you just in yeshiva yesterday? So I said, yeah, but I have to make parnasa. So, Hadrabah, parnasa, you're supposed to do it. I still remember him telling me that, because I felt very funny. Like the day before I went to be friends with him, the next day I'm on the roof. It was a very uncomfortable transition for me. You should know. And at the end of the day, it reminds me of this Gemara. So Dr. Gemara, David HaMelech was always looking for a good finance minister, but he needs somebody who has that ethic, who appreciates the value of a dollar. So David said, "This is the man I want." Kivin Shira David, Shemama in Chaviv love b'yoser. Now that David saw that this Yonason fellow loves money and he will guard money and protect money because that's very important to him. Mineyu ala oitros. He hired him to be his finance minister. So he got a really good promotion. From being a priest in a Beis Avodah Zarah, he suddenly became the finance minister. That's not a bad stepping stone to get to this job.
How is he building his finances?
So how did he live that long? Unless there were more generations there as well. And actually, there were more generations there as well. We know that because Jan came over to me yesterday and told me it's impossible that Eliezer married Yisro's daughter. Why is it impossible? Because Yisro was in Midian, and Eliezer and Eliezer was in Mitzrayim, and Yisro didn't come back to Mitzrayim till much later on. So there had to have been more generations, otherwise it doesn't stem anyway. So there were more generations there. It could be Eliezer didn't marry Mamish, Moshe Rabbeinu's sister-in-law. It could be it was also an Anikel. So then it could have been later. But you're saying Eliezer being Moshe's Anikel, how is it possible that he was around? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that worked. You're right. He was appointed to be in charge. Shmuel ben Gershom ben Menashe nogid al oitris. His name wasn't really Shmuel. He was Yonason. Rabbi Yochanan sheshav lekeil l'chalim. He got the name Shmuel because he was in Ganchin Tshuva. He did full Tshuva. So he must have lived a very long time. And as a matter of fact, he had a massive Arichas Yomim. And let's look at this Yerushalmi that the Rashbam quotes. I don't understand the words of Yerushalmi so clearly, but there's some very interesting parts. So let's look. Sheshav lekeil b'chaliboy. Achshav shayeloi mamin harbe. Now that he made a lot of money working over there, then he did tshuva. It's funny, a lot of people, when they have to build themselves up, they're not makbid on Shabbos, they're probably, and the people, as they get older, they start becoming frumer. They made their money already. Now they can become frum. Right? ben Gershon ben Menashe, who born of Kaihanim, l'shevet Adoni, ad yoim galoi sa'aretz. It says that Yonason ben Gershon was a kohen l'shevet Adoni until Klal Yisrael was thrown out of Eretz Yisrael. So clearly he had a massive Arichas Yomim over here. For Aminim b'sei da'olam ad yoim shegola matadam upsela shel micha imoy. So it's mashma that this was going on for many, many years. Kach before prepare Basra the brachas Yerushalmi. So I'm going to read what I understand. Mesiven lei, they asked Akasha, v'aksiv ad yoim galoi sa'aretz. You're telling me until they left Eretz Yisrael, that's hundreds of years later, he was still kohen? Amri, Kivin Shemeis David, we know the problem is here, if you're going to tell me he was David's finance minister and he did tshuva, how could it be that he was a priest by the Avodah Zarah, Ad Yom Galoi Sarish, which was after David? So what happened was he went back. Kivin Shemeis David, Amut Shlomo v'Hichlev Kol Hasan Kalitin. I'm assuming he changed all of the ministers. So he lost his job as finance minister. So now he's out of job and he couldn't find a job again. So he went back to his original job. But let me show you what type of priest he was. He wasn't exactly really dedicated to the interests of the Avodah Zarah. And this is how the Yerushalmi explains what happened. V'novi yechad zokein Yosy beveis hel. Amrin who have it was him. This Novi Yechad is referring to Yonasan ben Gershom. The Kaboy Hasam, the Gemara asked, Koyin lavoid zor v'erech yomim. He had such a riches yomim, being a koyin lavoid zor. That's the schus of a riches yomim to be a koyin lavoid zor. Amri zok Gemara, no. He was all in it for the money. Amri al yidei shayse enoy tzara b'avoid zor shlo. He never forgive that his avoid zor should make any money. Ketzad have a barnash ma'isila tor or emer or gedila avoid zor. Someone brought. He wanted to be makriv, an animal to avoid desire. And you tell this priest, bring it for me so that I can get into the good graces of this avoid desire. And he would tell the petitioner, Mama Yulach, what's he going to do for you? This avoid desire. Loy achla, it doesn't eat. Veloy shoyse, it doesn't drink. Veloy metiva, can't do anything good. Veloy Maria, can't do anything bad. So he said, but the my side, I believe in this avoid desire. How am I going to get on his good side to benefit from him? I'll tell you what you should do. Zilai bring me chada pinach to soilus, some measurement of soilus, the eser bein and 10 eggs. Ilu, you bring it for me, but now fight and I'll already work it out with him that he should take care of you. So he had a good business. Even also, as soon as the petitioner left, he ate the eggs. It was all for him. So he was making a good business. Also, chad bar pachin, but Amar Leke, there was some guy came and he said the same thing. Amalei told him, if he's not helping you at all, so what are you doing here if you say it's not this avodah is useless? So what do you mean it's not useless? Amalei begin chayah. It's a good living for me. So he was never really dedicated. He was never really doing avodah. He never believed in this avodah. He was just using it. Like the famous story with the two guys who were sitting outside a church collecting money. Right? Everyone knows that famous story. So all the goyim would come and they would. One was dressed as a goy, one was dressed as a Yid. The goy and Yid sitting together, and everybody would give the goy $20 just to stick it to the Jew, then spit in the Jew's face. After a while, the Yid walking by and he sees that this Jew is not so smart. He's sitting not in the best location to raise money. So he tells him, maybe you should sit in the Besmedrash. You'd probably make more money. Why would you be sitting here? So he shuckles his head. He makes believe he doesn't understand. The guy leaves. Then you see the Jew whispering to the goy. He thinks he's going to teach us how to make a buck. So that's exactly what Yonasan did. He was using it for the money. So it's funny how this nonsense went on a very long time ago. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. We have to get moving. Sons Yarshin from the father. We never discussed that. We discussed how the father Yarshin the son. That's what we spent all this time on, either from She'er or from Vavartan. But how do you know that a son Yarshin the father? Then only if there's no son, meaning the son is in the first position. So Rapapa challenged Abaye. Maybe there's another way to understand the pasuk that would in fact include a girl in Yerusha, a daughter in Yerusha. If there is a son, the son was Yarashin. Ikabas, or if there's a daughter, Tiras Bas, she'll get Yerusha. Ikabenu Bas. Maybe loy high layers for loy high layers, because that's uven ain't loy. If there's no son, that goes to the daughter. But maybe if there is a son, that goes to the son alone, and if there's a son and daughter, it goes to nobody. Right, Gemara, what do you mean it goes to nobody? The Ella man Yoris, who is going to yarshin if there's both a son and a daughter? Otu barkasha the masa lirois. What, it should go to the government? It should go to the Moshe Le'ir? Why would you think that? This is where governments got the idea of taking everything away. Of Yerusha tax. So come on, Papa, this is what I mean to ask. What I mean to ask is Ika Bain Ubas, if there's a Bain and a Bas, not that they shouldn't be action, rather Loi Hayaris Kule, for Loi Haylaris Kule, neither the son nor the daughter should yarshin everything, Elo Kia Dodilers. They should yarshin together. They should both have an equal share in the Yerusha. Omalei Abaye. Abaye told her Papa it wouldn't make sense to say that. Because if you're going to hold that they're both equal Yorshim, so what does it mean if someone dies, uvein ein loy, you give it to the daughter? Well, yeah, if you hold the Shita that they both are equal Yorshim, so it's obvious if there's only one person left, then it goes to that person because they're the Yorsh. The Yitzrich Kralash Minon, Hecha the less lay elochad bara. You think the pasuk needs to tell you that if there's only one child, lirsinu l'kul nixi? based on your shita that a girl and a boy yarshin equally. What do you mean if ben ein loy, you give it to the daughter? It's pashut. Of course, whoever is the surviving child, whether male or female, will yarshin. Zoktra Papa, no. There's another way to understand it. The dil mahakamash malon, the bas nami bas yerushin. Maybe it's teaching us that bas nami is bas yerushin. The Rashbam has two pshatim. He first quotes from his Rebbe. Maybe it teaches you as follows. Let's look at the Rashbam inside. Amalei Papa Labaye. Because that's Abaye's challenge. The fact that the Torah says Uven loy va'avartem can't mean that they're both on equal ground. Because if they're both on equal ground, it's pashut. If there's only one, that person comes and takes it. So, and it didn't say v'loy ksiv unesatem es nachlosoi levnoi levita. That's what it should have said. You give Yerusha to the son and the daughter, and if there's only one daughter, so then she gets it. Just like if there's only one son. You know why? The Hakamash Malon, the Bas Nami, Beloy Ben Yereshes. The Chiddush is that a daughter, even if there's no son, you would have thought that she doesn't get Yerusha. You might think she only gets Yerusha if there's a son there. The Sokadai Chamina, Ben Ubas, Yersun Kechada, they're equal in Yarshanim. Aval Hi Levada, but if she's by herself, then maybe Ikala Meimar, Deloy Teres Midi. She shouldn't Yarshin anything at all. And maybe that's why Kamash Malon, Bavartem, is Nachlos Levitoi, the Choshrin Shetirish Imaben. Kach Rabboisim Afarshim. This is how my Rebbes learn. Now, really, I wouldn't have learned this at all, because the Rashbam says, Velo Niri, he doesn't like this. But the Rashbam uses this pshat when he's explaining a later step in the Gemara. He explains the later step in the Gemara according to this pshat, as well as according to the next pshat. So vice versa, she's not discounting it completely. Why don't I like this svara? Very poshut. The Chibun Amalei Abaye. Abaye already said, Itzrich Kra Lashminon, the man the Leslie Alechadra. Abaye already said, the moment you know that they're going to yarshin equally, I don't need the Torah to tell me that either one would yarshin by themselves. If they both yarshin together, then they're both yarshin. So obviously, if there's only one left, that's the person who gets it. You can't say that Rav Papa is just ignoring what Abaye just said, because Abaye said it. Alma Pshita leHachsvara. It's pasha to Abaye. The chibon dikachada yirsun, since when there's a boy and a girl, they both yarshin equally, he's kulagaven. And you wouldn't have a mina that maybe if she's only there, she doesn't get it. If she gets it when there is a brother, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that she also gets it when there's no brother. She's an equal yarish. Upshita the tirois, kol nechosim, kileka ben bado. And you can't say that Rav Papa disagrees with Abaye's assumption. Because the Einzu Shidas Gemara, Sheyakish Hamaksha, Svaras Hamataritz, Beloy Taina Cheres. Rav Papa is not just going to ignore Abaye's argument. Abaye had a very good argument. The moment I know that a son and a daughter are yarshin together, I also know that the daughter can yarshin by herself. You don't have to say that only when they're both together. And if Rav Papa's Taka was arguing Abaye, he would have had to bring some type of riot. He can't just ignore that svara without a good argument. So therefore, Dr. Rashbam, this is what Rav Papa's comeback is as to why you need a special pasuk. It can't be to tell me that a girl yarshins on her own, because I for sure don't need a pasuk for that once I know that she yarshins when there's a brother and she yarshins together. But here's the situation. The bas nami kamoy ben bas yerushahi sheyeshna b'chlal yerushasa. Maybe the pasuk needs to tell you b'chlal this whole halacha that a girl is entitled to the Yerusha. The Sokadai Chabina, I might have thought, loy tirish bas klal, loy imaben, v'loy v'loy ben. The default would have been that she doesn't yarshin at all. Why should the default be that she doesn't yarshin at all? I to the curve koidim, she's the same korva. The teretz is because you've seen the whole parsha, and Shlomi Feinberg pointed this out. All of the other Yerushas were only talking about men. Give it to his brother, give it to his uncle. It never once discusses women when we're talking about Yerusha. The Bischarim Kabud Rachmana. The Kiddichsiv, when the Satam is Nachlasi, La Acheyovet. Uksiv Nami Mishpachtoi, and we know Mishpach Azavas Kru Mishpach. So all of the Sukkim discussing Yerusha are only talking about male. So maybe a daughter is completely excluded from the parish of Yerusha. So Kamash Malon to Yereshava. So maybe that's what you need it for. Maybe you needed to tell you that women are also in the game. Vehilchach, therefore, Ki Ika Ben, Nami Tivlak Vadei. Once we are making her into a Yerush, once a female could be a Yerush, let her be on the same footing as a child, as a son. Once we know that she is in the game of Yerusha, why should she be any different than a male? The Dilma Hachik Amarkra. Maybe this is what the pasuk means to say. Ish kiyamus uven ein loy sheyiresh imabas. What if someone dies and he does not have a son to yarshin together with the daughter? Then the havartim is called nachla levita. Now the question is, what's the havartim? Remember, havartim means you're taking it away from somebody who otherwise it should have belonged to naturally. And the havartim won't make sense if this is how you're learning the pasuk, that it's just telling you that Abbas is an equal Yerush. But we have Rebbe. Maybe the havartim is telling you something else. Kloimer oz oiveres kol hanachlo mishevet l'shevet al yidei bita k'ni Rebbe. Maybe the reason why I use the havartim is to teach us that this is the only way where a nachlo can be taken away from its rightful shevet and be diverted to a different shevet. That's what uses the lashon of havartim. But if there's a son, then even though her part is going to end up going to a different shevet, but there will still be some memory, some leftover that's going to remain within the shevet because of her brother. Since the pasuk wanted to tell us this halacha, which is Rebbe's halacha, that women cause Yerusha, land, to be diverted, it couldn't say in the Satam Levita, because it had to tell us this halacha. Okay, so that's Rav Papa's comeback. It's just a small little word in the Gemara, but it's a big comeback, as you could see, the way the Rashbam explains it. So effectively, the bas nami bas yerushahi, and the first part of the Rashbam means that a bas by yourself with Yarshin, which the Rashbam didn't like. The second shot is, how would you ever know that females are in the game? This is where you would know it from. Zok to Gemara, Zok to Baya, I don't need this pasuk to teach that to me. You know where I know that females are in the game? Now this is later on in Bamidbar, where people came to Moshe and said, if you're going to give these girls Yerusha, it's going to end up going to the different shevet. And they weren't happy about it. So Moshe said, therefore we're going to tell these girls to marry people from their own shevet. So in that parsha it says, V'chol bas yereshes nachla. So you see clearly Abbas is in the game. So once you see from there Abbas is in the game, I don't need the avartem as nachlos levitoi to tell me that the Abbas is in the game. It must be to tell us that the son takes precedence. Nafka, you learn it from the whole Bas Yereshes Nachla. So the first pshat in how you know that boys yarshin and they have precedence to girls is from if someone dies without a son, v'havartem is nachlos levitoi. So clearly the ben is in the first position, and only if there's no ben does a bas get it. But Rabbi Yaakov had another makor from where you would know that the son yarshins before the daughter, because it says Loma Yigora Shem Avinu B'Toich Mishpach. When the B'nai Shalachot originally came to Moshe, that was their taina. Loma Yigora Shem Avinu B'Toich Mishpach. Notice they were not being selfish. Why don't we get land? No. Why will my father's mishpacha now lose their land? They were worried about their father. Ki ein loy ben, because he doesn't have a son. My father didn't have a son. Haimod ein loy ben. The reason why it would leave the shevet is only the ein loy ben. Hayesh loy ben, ben koidim. So you see from their taina alone that they understood that a ben is koidim, and they were saying that shouldn't be that way. Rather, we should be able to yarshin equally. Maybe b'nai Slavchad we're claiming that that's not fair. And to the contrary, it should be that we can yarshin equally. And therefore, nitna Torah, and maybe when the Torah came along and said that they should get, it was basically, the Torah was prompted by what the B'nai Slavchad said. Let's look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says something, this is very, very interesting. The Rashbam says, they're saying that they thought that it should. They thought it didn't. They thought that the din was that it only goes to the son, not the daughter, and they were saying it's not fair. Lama Yigara, we should also be able to get a chelik. And then nitna Torah la'achar divrei b'nai Shalachot, almost in reaction to the b'nai Shalachot, the Torah spoke out this halacha in reaction. I'm not going to say the Torah is mechadish halacha. you're responsible because the Torah was made before the world. Now maybe the Torah shares this halacha in response to the Tzalafchad. Shalachar Devreim Nemra Parshas Nachos. After their claim, they prompted that the Torah should at that point teach us the halachas of Nachla. V'nischad shalacha the bra ubarta yirsim kachada v'log sheyusvurais. So they thought they wouldn't have a chayla, and they said it's not fair. And maybe that's when the Torah said they're equal. Maybe the Torah over there says that they're equal. Maybe that's pshat. So Elamai, from here you can't bring a raya that the ben is before the bas, because from this parsha it might be that the ben and bas are on equal ground. Elamachavada kedishan and meikara. We have to go back to our first pshat. Ravina says, no, I have another way where we could have learned that a ben is Yorish before the bas. Because it says Hakar Velov, right? The pasuk says this was the first pasuk we encountered. So Hakar Velov dictates that the son should be before the daughter because the son is closer. Hakar of Kodim. Frank Gemara, who said the son is closer? Umay kurva de ben mibas. Why do you say that the son is closer to the daughter? Sheben kom tachas oviv liyada ulesteach. Are you telling me it's because of you and steach? Yada is not a right because bas la pas yadu. It's not because she doesn't have that koyach. It's just that a woman can't marry a woman. I'm saying it's loud on YouTube. A woman cannot marry a woman, so it's a technical difficulty. Not that she doesn't have that zchus. Maybe she does yarish that zchus. It's just that she can't marry a woman. But you don't have a right from there that the son is closer than the daughter. And steachuza nami mehai percha gufa who do kaima leila tana klum yeshibum el b'mokam shein ben. If you remember, why is it that by steachuza a girl can't buy it? A girl's buying it doesn't help to save it from going to the kahanim by yovel to keep it in the family. Only a son does. It's because of this pircha. It's klum yeshibum ella b'mokam shein ben. So she could do it. So since she could also save it, she saves it because of this taina. So and that's how we learned. Remember, Yerusha and Teichuz were linked because in both cases it doesn't say ben, it says she'er, and we learn what it means. So therefore, there is no way you see that in fact a bas is not as close as a ben. So that svar is also obgishlagen. We have to go back to our raya of ishkiyam who ben and loi. Then only vavartem is nachlas lebitoy, because the ben comes before the bas. The boy said, or maybe we have another makor that the son yarshes. Which the Torah speaks about avodim, about a knaini. The pasuk says, "V'snachaltem oisam levnechem acharechem," and we darshan b'nechem v'loy b'neisech. Correct the Gemara. Are you going to tell me whenever the Torah says b'nechem, it doesn't mean generally your children? It means bedafka sons and not daughters. What about the bracha that we say in Krishma? You're going to tell me that if you follow the Torah, Kadosh Baruch Hu is only going to give your sons a long life and not your daughters? You can't make that argument. So that's why bracha shine. A bracha, logical, it applies to all children. But when you said Yerusha, if the Torah meant that Yerusha goes to the daughter, it should have said V'snachalta Mosam Lizaracha Makareka. It should have used a neutral term. Since it didn't, it teaches you that Yerusha is only to the son first, not to the daughter. If there's two brothers and they share a father, then they yarshin from each other. How do you know this? When it says the brothers came to Yosy, they said Shneim Osir Achim Anaknu, and they were not brothers from the mother. They didn't share mothers, but they all shared a father. So you see, when the Torah says a lashon of Achim, it means they share a father. Mala alon min av v'loy min ha'im avkad min av v'loy min. Correct more v'lamali. Why would I need this extra limit of Achim? Anyway, I know it's always going based the father. Mi mishpachtoi v'yarsoi success. The Torah says when it comes to Yerusha, it's always only mi mishpachtoi. Mishpacha zav kru mishpacha same enu kru mishpacha. So why do I need an extra pasuk to tell me that Achim are only Achim in Av? Anything in the parish of Yerusha is only min Av because it's only mishpacha it's min Av. So we don't need it. So why do we need this limit of Achim? This Gzeir Shav of Achva Achim de Yaakov is referring to the Parsha of Yibum, where it says Ki Yeshvu Achim Yachtov, and one dies without a child. There's a Chi of Yibum. So for that we learn Achva that there's only a Chi of Yibum if the brother that died was a brother who you shared a father with, not a brother who you shared a mother. By Isha Sima, a person can yarshin his mother. How do you know a person yarshins his mother? We know on the Mili, Taner Rabbanon, V'chol Bas Yereshes Nachlo, Mimatois B'nei Yisrael. This pasuk is also in that follow-up parsha when the Shvatim told Moshe Rabbeinu, if you give land to B'nai Tzalachot, it's going to be diverted out of our Shevet. So the pasuk says, "V'chol Bas Yereshes Nachlo, Mimatois B'nei Yisrael." The pasuk continues and says they should marry. If you look at the pasuk, it says La'echad mimishpachas matei aviyah tia liish. They should make sure to marry within their shevet l'man yirshu b'nei Yisrael ish nachlas avosav, to keep every share in the right shevet. So it says a lashon as follows: B'chol bas yereshes nachlo mi matois b'nei Yisrael heich bas yereshes b'nei matois. It says a daughter can yarshin two shvatim. How is it possible for a daughter to yarshin from two separate shvatim if she only yarshins from her father? Elazu shavia mishevet echad, the ima mishevet acher, umesu, and they both died. The yarshasan, and she yarshin them both. So that tells you that a daughter could yarshin sai from her father, sai from her mother. But we're looking for a makar that the son yarshins from the mother. They nelabas. The minayin amri kavachem uma basha who are koich b'nichsayav. Madach bas who's only second, who only has a second position of nichsayav. Yafa koich b'nichsayim. We see from the pasuk that she yarshins from her mother. Ben sheyafa koich b'nichsayav. A son who we know is even takes precedent to his sister by nichsayav. Einoidin sheyafa koich b'nichsayim. So we'll stop here because we're going to get into the nichsayim. But at least we have some makar of why children yarshin their mother. Okay, we'll stop here. Tomorrow. Tomorrow again we're learning 7 because it's a holiday. Thank you.